What is the price of a person's dignity? For a New York waitress, it was exactly $1 when the city's most feared and reclusive billionaire, the legendary Harrison Blackwood, sat at her table. She expected a challenging night. What she did not expect was the deliberate, soul-devastating insult he left behind on her check. A single, crisp dollar bill. But this was no ordinary dollar, and her reaction was not what he expected. Nobody ever expected it. What she did next would not truly justify her actions. It would unravel a mystery of a decade and bring a $3 billion empire to its knees. The air in the Gilded Sparrow was heavy with it, the scent of money and truffle oil. It was a place where conversations were whispered, deals were closed with sealed documents and the clinking of wine glasses. It provided a delicate soundtrack for the city's elite. For Araceli, it was just Tuesday. Her feet ached in her sensible black flats, a dull pain that had become part of her uniform, as much as the starched white apron tied around her waist. At 24, she was a veteran of the service industry, a master of the polite, discreet smile and the art of anticipating a client's needs before they themselves were even aware of them. Tonight, however, was different. Tonight, Table 7 was occupied by Harrison Blackwood. He wasn't just a regular high-level player. He was a phantom, a whisper in the financial world. CD Blackwood Industries, a technological monolith with its fingers in everything from satellite communications to advanced robotics. He was a man who moved markets with a single word. He was also notoriously reclusive, rarely seen outside the tinted windows of his armored SUV or the imposing steel and glass fortress of his corporate headquarters. His presence in a public restaurant was an event so rare it felt like a glitch in the city's matrix. He had arrived without a reservation, his two severe-looking bodyguards scanning the room with cold, professional eyes before allowing him to sit. Mr. Dubois, the perpetually agitated restaurant manager, had practically genuflected before assigning the table to Ara, his voice a tight, panicked squeak. "Miss, only the best. Nothing less." Ara merely nodded. She had served arrogant celebrities, demanding politicians, and condescending trust fund kids. Harrison Blackwood was just another man with a big appetite and an even bigger ego, or so she thought. The meal was a silent, tense affair. Blackwood spoke only to order, his voice a low, raspy monotone that seemed to absorb the sound around him. He wanted the pan-seared foie gras, the bone-in tomahawk rare with a side of asparagus, hollandaise, and an '82 Chateau Margaux, a wine that cost more than her monthly rent. He made no eye contact, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond the restaurant's walls, as if the opulent surroundings were nothing more than a cheap theatrical stage. Ara moved with practiced efficiency. She decanted the wine with a surgeon's precision. She presented each course with silent grace and cleared plates with the ghostly quietness of a seasoned professional. She refilled his water glass exactly once when it was precisely 3/4 empty. She did not ask, "How is everything?" because she knew a man like Blackwood would find the question an irritating intrusion. She was a ghost, a pair of hands, an invisible cog in the machine of his lavish evening. The hours passed. The other customers left, their laughter and chatter fading into the New York night until only Table 7 remained. Finally, Blackwood pushed aside his dessert plate, the remnants of an untouched chocolate lava cake. He made a short, dismissive gesture with his hand. The check. The bill amounted to $14,142.50. Ara discreetly placed the leather folder at the edge of the table and retreated to a respectful distance. Blackwood did not even look at her. He reached into the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored suit jacket and pulled out a money clip, but he did not produce a black credit card. Instead, he meticulously extracted a single crisp dollar bill. He flicked it onto the table, deliberately placed it inside the folder, and stood up. His bodyguards materialized at his shoulders. Without a word, without a glance back, Harrison Blackwood exited the Gilded Sparrow, leaving a wake of stunned silence. Ara remained frozen for a moment, her heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. Mr. Dubois rushed over, his face pale. He opened the folder, saw the solitary dollar bill, and his expression crumpled from fear to rage. "Unbelievable," he hissed, his voice trembling. "The sheer contempt, the pure arrogance." He turned his fury on Ara, his default setting when things went wrong. "What did you do? Did you say something to offend him?" "I barely said a word, sir," Ara replied, her voice firm despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "Well, he's clearly sending a message," he snapped, snatching the folder away. "This comes out of your pay, do you understand? Every last cent. He stormed off toward his office, already calculating the damage. The other staff members, the busboys and fellow servers who had been watching from the shadows, began to whisper. It was the ultimate insult. In their world, a tip was a measure of respect, of recognition. A $1 tip on a $14,500 meal was a calculated act of cruelty, a power play designed to humiliate. It was a statement. You are worth nothing. Ara walked toward the table, her legs feeling strangely heavy. She picked up the folder that Dubois had thrown down again in his rage, and there it was, a single dollar. But as she picked it up, her fingers brushed the crisp linen paper, and a strange sensation washed over her. It wasn't just anger, it was something else, pity. In the man's cold, empty eyes, she hadn't seen arrogance. She had seen a profound, bottomless void. This was not the act of a powerful man. It was the act of a desperate one. She looked closer at the bill. It was old but impeccably preserved, and in the corner, almost invisible to the naked eye, drawn in what looked like faded ink, was a curious little symbol, a star with an elongated point, almost like a comet. Her breath caught in her throat. She had seen it before. She wore it herself, hanging around her own neck. The symbol on the dollar bill was not a mere doodle. It was a ghost from her past, a phantom limb of a memory she couldn't quite grasp. Ara's hand instinctively went to the small silver locket she always wore tucked beneath her uniform collar. Her mother had given it to her on her 10th birthday, one of the last lucid gifts before the fog of early-onset Alzheimer's claimed her. "From your father," her mother had whispered, her eyes distant, "so you never forget him." Ara never took it off. On one side was a tiny, thumbnail-sized, blurry photo of a smiling young man with kind eyes and a familiar jawline. Her father, Daniel Vance. The other side was not a photo. It was a smooth, polished piece of silver on which was engraved exactly the same symbol as on the dollar bill, a star like a comet. Growing up, she had asked her mother about him, but the answers were always fragmented, lost in the labyrinth of her deteriorating mind. A brilliant man, an engineer, he had to leave for work. That was all she ever got. He was a ghost, a man who existed only in a blurry photograph and a cryptic symbol. Back in her cramped fourth-floor walk-up apartment in Queens, the city's distant hum a lullaby, she sat at her small kitchen table. The dollar bill lay under the glare of a desk lamp, the locket beside it. The symbols were identical. It could not be coincidence. Harrison Blackwood, a man who lived in a different universe than her own, had just handed her a key, but to what door, she had no idea. The next day at the restaurant was brutal. The story of the billionaire's dollar had spread like wildfire. Some colleagues offered whispered words of sympathy, while others cast her glances of smug pity, as if she were now marked with Blackwood's contempt. Mr. Dubois treated her with glacial disdain, assigning her to the least desirable tables near the kitchen, a punishment for a crime she did not commit. "Forget it, Ara," said Maria, a kind, older waitress who had taken her under her wing. "Men like that are emotional vampires. They feed on humiliating you. Don't give him the satisfaction of thinking about it." But she could not forget. It was no longer about the money or the humiliation. It was about the symbol. That night, she did not sleep. She sat in front of her laptop, the dollar bill and the locket, her only companions. She started with the obvious. Harrison Blackwood. Search results painted a portrait of a titan, a genius who had built his empire from scratch. But the articles were all business-focused, filled with jargon about acquisitions, market capitalizations, and disruptive technologies. His personal life was a black hole. No wife, no children, no public friends. The few photos that existed showed him with the same cold, impenetrable expression he had worn at the restaurant. He was a fortress. Then she tried a different approach. She typed Blackwood Industries scandal. The results were immediate and shocking. A Wall Street Journal article from almost 15 years ago screamed from the screen, "Chief engineer of Blackwood Industries accused of corporate espionage, disappears with proprietary technology." Her blood ran cold. She clicked the link, her hand trembling. The article detailed a massive corporate crisis. The company's most promising project, a revolutionary energy source codenamed Project Chimera, had been compromised. Schematics, prototypes, and research data had vanished overnight. The main suspect, the chief engineer and architect of the project, had also disappeared. His name was Daniel Vance. Ara felt the air leave her lungs. The screen blurred. Everything was there. A photo of her father, younger but unmistakably him, accompanied the article. He was described as Blackwood's right-hand man, his closest friend, the prodigy who was destined to change the world, and then a traitor who had supposedly sold the company's future to a rival corporation for an astronomical sum before disappearing without a trace. It was a lie. It had to be. The man in the photo, the man with kind eyes, could not be a corporate thief. The father her mother remembered as brilliant and good could not have done this. This was the reason he had left. He wasn't on a work trip. He was a fugitive. Ara's mind raced, piecing together fragments of a puzzle she never knew existed. Harrison Blackwood, her father's best friend and eventual accuser, the man who had destroyed her family's name and left her to grow up fatherless with a mother who slowly faded away. He hadn't just left her a dollar tip, he had left her a message. But what was it? A taunt? A clue? She looked again at the dollar bill. It wasn't just the symbol. There was something else. It was an old bill, Series 1995, but next to the serial number was a small printed star. She Googled dollar bill with star, a star note, a replacement bill printed to substitute a defective one. Rare, but not impossible. But it was another piece, another detail. Her father was an engineer, a man of details and precision. Everything had to mean something. The insult, the dollar, the star note, the symbol, they were all connected. Harrison Blackwood wasn't just a cruel billionaire testing a waitress. He was searching for something. After 15 years, he was still searching, and in his cold, calculating way, he had just launched a flare, hoping the right person would see it, and she had seen it. A new feeling began to replace the confusion and hurt. It was a cold, hard resolve. For 15 years, the world had believed her father was a criminal. For 15 years, she had lived in the shadow of a lie. Harrison Blackwood had started this. Now she would finish it. She was no longer just a waitress. She was Daniel Vance's daughter, and she was coming for answers. The narrative the world had accepted was simple. Daniel Vance was a traitor. He had betrayed his friend, his company, and his country, vanishing into the ether with secrets valued in billions. But Ara knew her father, not by memory, but by the echoes of his love from her mother and the silent integrity in his photographed eyes. That man was no thief. Her first step was to understand the battlefield. She spent every free moment on her commute to work, during her lunch break, late at night, devouring every piece of information she could find about the Project Chimera scandal. She learned that the project wasn't just another tech endeavor, it was a paradigm shift, a clean, hyper-efficient energy source capable of powering entire cities with zero emissions. It would have made Blackwood Industries the most powerful corporation on Earth. The supposed buyer of the stolen data was Blackwood's fiercest rival, Marcus Thorne, CEO of the then-emerging competitor S Dynamics. The media had a field day, portraying it as a classic corporate warfare story with her father as Thorne's pawn, but articles noted a strange detail. S Dynamics never managed to replicate the technology. They stumbled for years on the brink of bankruptcy before pivoting to less ambitious projects. If Thorne had paid for the data, he had apparently received nothing of value. It was a loose thread, a detail that didn't fit the neat story of betrayal. Ara felt like she was chasing a ghost. How could she, a waitress with a dwindling bank account, uncover a truth that had been buried for 15 years under the weight of Harrison Blackwood's immense power and influence? The answer, she realized, lay in her father's nature. He was an engineer, a man of systems and logic. He would have built a safeguard, a trail of breadcrumbs that only someone who thought like him, or someone he loved, could follow. The star note and the symbol were the first breadcrumbs. She focused on the dollar bill itself. She took it to a rare currency dealer in a dusty little shop in the West Village. The old man peered at it through a jeweler's loupe. "It's a 1995 series star note. Fine," he grumbled. "In this condition, maybe worth $10 or $15. "Is there anything else special about it?" Ara asked, her heart sinking. "Not really, just a replacement bill. The print run was from the Fort Worth facility." "Wait a minute." He squinted, adjusting the loupe. "That's odd. The ink on that tiny drawing, the star thing, it's not standard. It looks like, well, it has a high iron content, almost as if it was drawn with a specialized technical pen." A technical pen, the kind an engineer would use. That night, Ada did something that terrified her. She remembered a story her mother used to tell, a rambling, fragmented tale about a magic box her father had built for her, a box that held all his secrets. Ara had always dismissed it as a fairy tale, born from a broken mind. But now she wondered. She went to the storage unit she kept, the one holding the few remaining possessions from her mother's life. In the back corner, beneath a dusty tarp, was an old, heavy wooden chest. It wasn't locked with a key, but with a strange circular dial covered in symbols. She had tried to open it as a child, with no luck. Now she looked at it with new eyes. The symbols weren't random, they were constellations, and there, among them, was her symbol, the comet star. She traced its shape on the dial. A soft click echoed in the silent storage unit. The lid creaked open. The chest was filled with old notebooks. They were crammed with her father's elegant, precise handwriting. Page after page of complex equations, schematics, and chemical formulas. It was the language of a genius, but tucked in the very bottom was a slim, leather-bound journal. This was different. There were no equations. It was a diary. She took it home and read it under the dim light of her apartment, her world tilting on its axis with each page. Her father's words were filled with excitement about Project Chimera, but also with growing paranoia. October 12th. Harrison is a visionary, but he's becoming reckless. Investors are pressing for a faster launch. They don't understand the risks. The energy source is stable, but its core is volatile, in the wrong hands. November 3rd. Marcus Thorne accosted me today. He knows things he shouldn't know. There's a leak within the company. I don't trust Harrison's new head of security. November 28th. I found it, a back door, in the system. Someone is duplicating our data. It's an inside job. I tried to tell Harrison, but he's surrounded by new advisors. He wouldn't listen. Thinks I'm being paranoid. December 5th. Harrison accused me today. My friend. He thinks it's me. Thorne must have planted evidence. It's a setup. I have to protect Chimera. I can't let them have it. I've initiated Protocol Vance. The core is safe. They'll have the data, but it will be useless. Without the key. A key only my North Star will know how to find. Her North Star. It was his affectionate nickname for her. The final entry was frantic, dated the night he disappeared. They're coming for me. I have to go. Ara, my sweet girl, if you are reading this, know I did this for you. I didn't run from you. I ran to protect you. Don't trust Harrison, but the answer is with him. The key is split in two. I have one half. He has the other, only he doesn't know what it is. It's the first thing he ever gave me. Our promise. Find it. The comet will guide you. Ara closed the journal, her hands trembling. Her father was not a traitor. He was a hero. He had hidden his life's work to keep it out of the wrong hands, and he had been framed for it. Harrison Blackwood was not the mastermind. He was a pawn, a king who had been checked by his own people, manipulated into betraying his best friend. And the tip, the dollar tip, was not a random act. It was a quest. For years, Harrison Blackwood, the cold, reclusive billionaire, had been silently, desperately searching for the child of the friend he had wronged. He was leaving star notes all over the world, hoping Daniel Vance's daughter would recognize the symbol and understand the message. It wasn't an insult. It was a summons. The board was set, the pieces in place, but a new player had just been revealed. Marcus Thorne, the man who had orchestrated the entire conspiracy. And if he had been monitoring Blackwood, he surely knew of his peculiar tipping habit. He would know Blackwood was getting closer, which meant he might soon be looking for her too. The Gilded Sparrow felt like a cage. Every clinking glass, every polite inquiry about the wine list grated on Ara's nerves. She was living a double life. By day, she was the quiet, efficient waitress, enduring Mr. Dubois' small tyrannies. By night, she was the daughter of a brilliant fugitive, piecing together a 15-year-old conspiracy from the ghostly whispers in her father's journal. Her father's words resonated in her mind. The answer is with him. The key is split in two. He has the other half. It's the first thing he ever gave me. She had to reach Harrison Blackwood, but as a waitress, she couldn't simply request a meeting with a man who lived in self-imposed exile, surrounded by layers of security thicker than a bank vault. Writing a letter was out of the question. It would be intercepted and discarded by an army of assistants. She needed a way to bypass the walls, to send a message only he would understand. The answer, she suspected, lay somewhere in her father's notebooks. They were filled with dense engineering concepts, but she began to notice a pattern. Scattered among the complex schematics were doodles, seemingly random strings of numbers and references to childhood stories. The same stories her father used to tell her, stories she thought her mother had invented in her confusion. There was the Silver Knight and the Binary Castle and the Princess who spoke in prime numbers. They weren't just stories, they were ciphers. Her father, the ultimate engineer, had embedded security protocols in her childhood. One entry in his journal caught her eye. Harrison and I built our first company on a handshake and a simple substitution cipher from Mrs. Davidson's 8th grade algebra class. He was always so proud of it. Our unbreakable code. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble based on the ramblings of a man on the run. But it was all she had. She quit her job. She walked into the Gilded Sparrow, handed Mr. Dubois her apron, and endured his blustering indignation with a calm she didn't feel. "I'm pursuing a new opportunity," she said simply, and walked out, leaving him speechless for the first time in his managerial career. Her new opportunity was walking into the lion's den. Blackwood Industries headquarters was a shard of obsidian plunged into the Manhattan skyline. Its lobby was a cathedral of cold marble and steel, guarded by security personnel who looked carved from granite. Ara, dressed in a simple but professional black blazer she had bought at a thrift store, walked toward the main reception desk. The woman behind the desk looked at her with an expression of bored intolerance. "I'm here to see Mr. Blackwood," Ara said, her voice betraying none of the terror screaming through her veins. "Do you have an appointment?" The question was a dismissal. "No," Ara said, "but please give him a message from me." Ara slid a small, sealed envelope across the marble counter. "Tell him it's about Mrs. Davidson's 8th grade algebra class." The receptionist's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. It was the most ridiculous message she had ever heard. She was about to call security, but something in Ara's unwavering gaze gave her pause. With a sigh of theatrical exasperation, she picked up her phone. Ara waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was sure she would be thrown out, laughed out of the building. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, a man in a dark suit with an earpiece emerged from a frosted glass door. He didn't speak to the receptionist. He walked directly to Ara. "Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice low and devoid of emotion. "Mr. Blackwood will see you." He guided her through a maze of silent white corridors, through security checkpoints that scanned her from head to toe. The air grew thinner, the silence deeper. With each floor they ascended in a private, high-speed elevator. Finally, they stopped at the top floor. The doors opened directly into an office that seemed to occupy the entire penthouse. 3 of the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a godlike view of the city below. And there, standing in the center of the room, his back to her, was Harrison Blackwood. He looked older than at the restaurant, the weight of his empire and his past etched into the stiff set of his shoulders. "Mrs. Davidson gave a test every Friday." His voice, a low rumble that echoed in the cavernous space, said. He still hadn't turned around. The final question was always a bonus, an encrypted message. 826 B51, a simple substitution cipher, child's play. The first message was, "Teamwork makes the dream work," Ara said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You and my father used it as the first password for your startup." He turned slowly, his eyes, cold and gray like a winter storm, widened almost imperceptibly. They weren't fixed on her face, but on the small silver locket resting against her blazer. "Who are you?" he breathed, though he already knew the answer. Ara stepped forward into a shaft of sunlight cutting through the glass. "My name is Ara Vance." She took the dollar bill from her pocket and placed it on his vast, empty mahogany desk. "And I think you have something that belongs to me." For the first time in 15 years, the mask of the ruthless billionaire shattered. In his eyes, Ara saw not an industry titan, but a man haunted by a ghost, the ghost of his only friend. The insult at the restaurant had been a desperate prayer, and she was the impossible, incredible answer. As Vance walked into the heart of Blackwood Industries, a different meeting was taking place across town in a sterile, minimalist office overlooking Central Park. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Sun Dynamics, watched a live feed on a large monitor. The feed was from a discreet, high-resolution camera positioned across the street from the Blackwood Tower. In the lobby, he watched as a young woman in a simple blazer was escorted by Blackwood's head of security toward the private elevator. "Run facial recognition," Thorne commanded, his voice a low, dangerous drone. "Cross-reference with everything we have on Blackwood's known associates, employees, contacts. I want to know who she is." His subordinate, a thin man with nervous eyes named Gavin, typed furiously at a console. Marcus Thorne had not become a billionaire by accident. While Harrison Blackwood built walls around himself, Thorne built networks of information. He had spent a fortune on corporate espionage for over a decade. His primary target, always being the man he had publicly, if indirectly, accused of theft, Harrison Blackwood. He knew of Blackwood's reclusive habits, his erratic behavior, and most importantly, his strange decade-long ritual of leaving unique star dollar bills as tips at high-end restaurants around the world. Thorne had long suspected it was a code, a quest. He just didn't know for what, or for whom. Now it seemed the quest was over. "Sir," Gavin said, his voice tense, "we have a match, but it's impossible." "Nothing is impossible. Gavin, speak." "Her name is Ara Vance, 24 years old, currently resides in Queens. Until yesterday, she was a waitress at the Gilded Sparrow." Gavin paused, swallowing hard. "Sir, she's Daniel Vance's daughter." The air in the room went still. Marcus Thorne stared at the frozen image of Ara's face on the screen. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined set of her jaw. For 15 years, the ghost of Daniel Vance had haunted him. Vance was the loose end, the only man who could prove that Thorne had not only tried to buy stolen technology, but had orchestrated the entire setup from within, using moles within Blackwood's own security team. Thorne had assumed Vance was dead or gone forever. He never imagined he had a child. "Blackwood found her," Thorne whispered, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. After all this time, the old fool actually found her. This changed everything. If the girl was there, it meant she probably had a message from her father. It might even mean she knew where Vance had hidden the true prize, the prototype, and the final activation key for Project Chimera. The data Thorne had acquired 15 years ago had been a decoy, a useless pile of corrupted code that had almost bankrupted him. Daniel Vance had outsmarted them all. "Where did he meet her?" Thorne demanded. "The Gilded Sparrow, sir, 2 nights ago," Gavin reported, pulling up restaurant receipts and credit card records. Blackwood was alone. The check was over $14,500. He left a $1 tip. Thorne laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Of course he did. The signal. And the girl was smart enough to see it, smarter than her father. He might have been a genius, but too trusting." Thorne stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The city stretched out below him, a kingdom he had fought and cheated to conquer. But the true throne had always eluded him, the one built on the world-changing power of Chimera. Now a waitress from Queens held the key. "Gavin," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm, "I want her under 24/7 surveillance. I want to know where she lives, who she talks to, what she eats for breakfast. I want a full-spectrum analysis of her digital footprint, and I want a team ready to move. The moment she leaves that building, I want her." "Move her, sir? As in, acquire her?" Gavin asked nervously. "No, not yet," Thorne mused. "Let the girl and the ghost have their reunion. Let Blackwood tell her everything he knows. Let them lead us straight to the prize. Daniel Vance was sentimental. He would have hidden his legacy somewhere significant, somewhere personal. The girl is the map. When she finds the X that marks the spot, then we move, and we take everything." His gaze fixed on the Blackwood Tower across the city. He could almost feel the energy of the conversation happening in that penthouse office. A father's legacy, a friend's guilt, a daughter's quest for justice. It was all so beautifully dramatic, and he was about to write the brutal final act, the shadow of his ambition, cast 15 years ago, finally falling upon the last unsuspecting player in his long game. The waitress had just gone out of the frying pan and into the heart of a roaring fire. In the penthouse office, the silence was a living thing, broken only by the distant wail of a city siren. Harrison Blackwood looked at Ara, his face a canvas of emotions he hadn't shown the world in over a decade. Regret, shock, and a glimmer of something that might have been hope. "I looked for him," Blackwood said, his voice hoarse. "For years, I hired the best private investigators in the world. They found nothing. It was as if he had stepped off the face of the earth." "He didn't want to be found," Ara responded, her calm exterior belying the storm inside. "He knew you wouldn't believe him. He wrote in his journal that Marcus Thorne had framed him, that there was a leak within your company." Blackwood flinched at Thorne's name. "I was a fool," he admitted, turning to gaze at his city, his kingdom built on a foundation of broken trust. "I was arrogant. Thorne was a jackal, nipping at my heels, and I was so obsessed with beating him that I couldn't see the enemy I had already let within my own walls. When the data disappeared and the evidence pointed to Daniel, it was easier to believe the lie." He walked over to a sleek minimalist bookshelf and pressed a hidden panel. A section of the wall slid back to reveal a safe. He entered a code, and the heavy door swung open. From within, he pulled out a small, velvet-lined box. "Your father was right," Blackwood said, placing the box on his desk. "The key to Chimera is split. He created a cipher so complex no computer on Earth could break it. It requires 2 components, a physical catalyst, the prototype, and a digital activation key. The key itself was split into two halves, two unique alphanumeric strings that are useless on their own, but when combined, they unlock the entire system. He opened the box. Inside, nestled in a bed of black velvet, was not a key, but a simple, elegant fountain pen. It was silver, with fine intricate engraving along its barrel. "The first thing he ever gave me," Blackwood said, his voice thick with memory. "We had just secured our first round of funding. We were celebrating in a cheap diner. I told him we needed to sign the partnership agreement, but all I had was a chewed-up ballpoint. The next day he gave me this," he said, "to sign all the billion-dollar deals to come. I've kept it with me ever since." He handed it to Ara. It was heavier than it looked. "I never knew," he continued. But Daniel, in his genius, embedded his half of the key within the pin itself. It's stored on a microscopic data chip, protected from any kind of remote scan. My half of his life's work, and I never knew I was holding it. "And my father's half?" Ara asked, her throat tight. "That's the question I've asked myself for 15 years, Blackwood confessed. He said in his final encrypted email to me, the one I dismissed as the delusions of a traitor, that he had secured his half. He called it the comet's tail." Ara's gaze dropped to her locket, the symbol, the comet star. Then she looked at the pin in her hand. The engraving along the barrel wasn't just a pattern, it was a star map. And there, at the end of the star map, was a single comet-like star, her symbol. "It's not a place," she whispered, her mind racing, connecting the dots her father had so carefully laid. "It's an object, his half of the key, it's in my locket." It seemed impossibly simple and impossibly brilliant. The two halves of the key had been separated by an abyss of betrayal and time, one kept in a billionaire's vault, the other worn around a waitress's neck, each bearer unaware of the other's existence. Blackwood looked at her, his eyes widening with growing realization. "Let me see." With trembling fingers, Ara unclasped the locket. It was a simple, old piece of silver, something no one would look twice at. She handed it to Blackwood. He took it to his desk, which shimmered and came alive as a high-resolution touchscreen interface. He placed the locket on a scanning pad. A complex diagram of the locket's interior appeared on the screen. "My God," he breathed. He used microplate lamination. "The photo of him isn't paper, it's a protected data wafer. Your mother must have known on some level what she was giving you." He placed the fountain pen next to it. "The system requires proximity to join the two halves. Once we do that, it will give us the location of the prototype." He hid it somewhere safe, somewhere only the completed key could reveal. It was the moment of truth, the culmination of a 15-year quest, the answer to a lifetime of questions. Blackwood looked at Ara, his expression one of profound apology. "Ara, I can never repay you for what I did to your father, to you, but we can restore his name. We can show the world what he created." He initiated the sequence. On the screen, two complex strings of code appeared, one from the pen, one from the locket. They began to intertwine, to merge. A progress bar appeared. "Decryption in progress." Suddenly, all the lights in the office went out. The massive screen died, plunging the room into the dim ambient light of the city. A piercing, shrill alarm began to blare. "What's happening?" Ara cried out. Blackwood's face was grim, his body rigid. "We have a breach," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Someone has cut the power and overridden my security." His personal phone, running on a separate network, buzzed to life. He looked at it, and a look of cold fury settled on his face. It was a text message from a number he knew all too well. It contained only 3 words. Checkmate. Marcus Thorne had made his move. The lion's den had been breached, not by force, but by a ghost in the machine, and they were trapped inside with the hunter. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows across the penthouse office. The shrill alarm was remotely silenced, replaced by an eerie, deep quiet. Harrison Blackwood moved with a speed that belied his age, his mind instantly shifting from repentant friend to ruthless strategist. "He's not just in the system, he's in the building," Blackwood stated, low and controlled. He wouldn't make such a bold move unless he was here to personally collect the prize. He quickly snatched the pen and locket from the dead interface on his desk. "But your security?" Ara began, her heart pounding. "My head of security from 15 years ago," Blackwood said, his eyes hard as flint. "The man I hired after Daniel warned me about a leak. He's been on Thorne's payroll from the beginning. I fired him years ago, but he would know the architectural schematics, the back doors. A smooth voice, laden with smug triumph, resonated from a hidden speaker in the ceiling. You were always a slow learner, Harrison. Brilliant at building things, terrible at judging people. Marcus Thorne. It's over, Thorne, Blackwood shot back, his eyes scanning the room for the source of the sound. The police have been alerted to the security breach. The building is on lockdown. Thorne's laugh was a dry, condescending chuckle. You're locked down, Harrison. I've controlled this building's network for the past 12 minutes. The alert that went to the police was a false alarm caused by a power spike. My men are on their way up. They'll be the only ones getting in or out. Now, be a good loser, place the pen in the locket on the desk, and step away. Ara's mind raced. They were trapped. Thorne had them cornered dozens of floors up with his own private army on the way. They had the two halves of the key, but they were useless without the prototype's location. The decryption had been cut off midway. He's bluffing, Blackwood muttered, more to himself than to Ara. His men can't get to this floor without my biometric authorization. Oh, I won't need it, Thorne's voice replied, dripping with amusement. Because you're going to give it to me, in exchange for her. On a large monitor that suddenly flickered to life, an image appeared. It was a live feed from a camera in the lobby. Maria, Ara's kind former colleague from the Gilded Sparrow, stood at a bus stop outside, looking at her phone. A black van pulled up beside her. Two men got out. Before she could react, they had bundled her inside, and the van sped away. Maria! Ara gasped, her blood turning to ice. A simple insurance policy, Thorne said coldly. Your friend from the restaurant. It seems you listed her as your emergency contact. A very loyal friend, from what my people tell me. It would be a shame if she had an accident. Give me the keys, Harrison, or the waitress's friend pays the price for your stubbornness. Blackwood stared at his face, a mask of fury and helplessness. He was checkmated. He could sacrifice the future of the company and his friend's legacy, or he could sacrifice the life of an innocent woman. But Thorne had made a critical miscalculation. He was playing chess against Harrison Blackwood, the king. He had overlooked the queen. Ara's mind flashed back to her father's journal, to the stories he used to tell her. The Silver Knight and the Binary Castle. A tale about a knight who couldn't breach the castle walls. So he taught the princess to send a message by tapping on the pipes, using binary code to communicate with the friendly village outside. It was a bedtime story. It was a lesson in asymmetric warfare. The decryption, she whispered urgently to Blackwood. Did it finish enough to give us anything? Any fragment? Blackwood pulled out his personal tablet, which operated on an independent military-grade network. He typed frantically. It's corrupted, incomplete. Only a string of geo coordinates, he showed her the screen. It must be the location of the prototype. No, Ara said, her eyes widening with sudden clarity. It's not. My father was paranoid. He would never make it that simple. This is a decoy, a trap for anyone who got this far. What are you talking about? The story, she said, thinking fast. The binary castle. The real message isn't in the data, it's in the way the data is presented. She stared at the raw code on his tablet, the scrambled lines of numbers and letters the decryption had managed to spit out before being cut off. It looked like gibberish, but it wasn't. It was a pattern, a hidden cipher within the alphanumeric soup. It's a message, she breathed. He encoded a message in binary within the corrupted file itself. Talk to me, Thorne. Blackwood stalled, his voice booming through the office, buying her time. What's your plan? You get the prototype. Then what? You'll be a fugitive. While Blackwood kept Thorne distracted, Ara's fingers flew across the tablet screen, isolating the ones and zeros. It was a simple code her father had taught her when she was 6. Child's play. The binary string resolved into a set of numbers. It wasn't a location. It was a patent number. Patent US 1835-42. I have it, she articulated to Blackwood. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He turned his full attention back to the invisible Thorne. Fine, Thorne. You win. I'm placing the keys on the desk. He started to walk toward the desk, but then Ara spoke, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the tension. The real key isn't here, Mr. Thorne, she called out. My father wasn't a fool. He knew someone like you might get this far one day. She turned to a stunned Harrison Blackwood. The prototype isn't hidden in some secret bunker, she said, looking straight into his eyes, hoping he understood. It's been in plain sight all along. It's the first thing he ever gave you, but it's not the pen. Blackwood's eyes widened in understanding. He remembered the partnership agreement. Their first startup failed within a year, but the company was still registered, and attached to that company was its first patent, filed by Daniel Vance, a patent for a novel desktop energy source. The patent office had dismissed it as impractical. No one had ever looked at it again. Patent number US 611-183,542. The prototype wasn't an object. It was an idea, hidden in the world's largest public database disguised as a failed invention. The pin in the locket didn't reveal a location. They provided the patent number and the activation key to unlock its true potential. "She's lying," Thorne's voice boomed, a hint of panic in it. "Now, to the door. You have 10 seconds. "Go ahead," Blackwood said, a wolfish smile spreading across his face. "The patent is public domain. While your thugs break down my door, my lawyers are filing an emergency injunction and activating the technology under its original patent. By the time you get in here, you'll be locked out forever. Your whole plan, 15 years of intrigue, derailed by a public record." Silence. The only sound was the hum of the emergency lights. Marcus Thorne, the master manipulator, had been outsmarted by a ghost, a billionaire, and a waitress who listened to her father's bedtime stories. The silence from the speakers was more damning than any scream. Marcus Thorne, a man who always had a calculated response, was speechless. He had played a 15-year game of chess, only to have the board overturned by a move he never saw coming. The elegance of Daniel Vance's plan was breathtaking. He hadn't hidden his greatest invention in a vault that could be breached. He had hidden it in the one place Thorne would never think to look, in plain sight, disguised as a failure. From the elevator, a heavy thud resonated, followed by the metallic screech of prying tools. Thorne's men were getting impatient. "It's over, Marcus," Blackwood said, his voice ringing with the cold authority of a king reclaiming his throne. "You can have your men storm my office. They will be met by the full force of my corporate security, who have now been alerted to your specific location in the building. You can run, but my digital forensics team is already unraveling the web you wove within my company. Every mole you planted, every piece of data you siphoned, it all leads back to you. By morning, Sun Dynamics will be a crime scene." A beat of silence, and then a guttural roar of fury erupted from the speaker, followed by the sound of something smashing. The connection cut. Thorne was on the run. Blackwood immediately got on his tablet, his fingers a blur. "Security! This is Blackwood. Seal all sub-level exits. Subject is Marcus Thorne, 45th floor, server room. He is to be considered hostile. Apprehend, do not engage." Then he made another call. "Get me a line with the district attorney's office. Tell them I'm ready to make a statement regarding the Daniel Vance case, yes, the one from 15 years ago, and tell them I'm bringing evidence." As the sounds of running footsteps and muffled shouts echoed from the floors below, a sense of surreal calm descended over the penthouse. Ara sank into a leather chair, the adrenaline that had sustained her finally giving way to deep, bone-weary exhaustion. She had walked in here a waitress seeking answers, and had emerged as the key to bringing down an empire. "You saved it," Blackwood said quietly, looking at Ara with an expression of profound awe and gratitude. Daniel, his brilliance saved it. He pulled up the old patent file on his tablet. There it was, a novel desktop energy source. The schematics looked deceptively simple, but with the activation key, the combined alphanumeric string from the pin and the locket, the true, world-changing complexity of Project Chimera was revealed. It wasn't just an energy source. It was a blueprint for a new world. Hours later, the building was swarming with federal agents. A pale and disheveled Marcus Thorne was led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. His moles within Blackwood Industries were rounded up one by one, and Maria, shaken but unharmed, had been located and secured by the police, Thorne's men having abandoned her as soon as their mission crumbled. In the silence of the now secure office, as the sun began to rise and paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Harrison Blackwood turned to Ara. The weight of 15 years seemed to have lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a clarity he hadn't possessed in a long time. "His name will be cleared," Blackwood promised, his voice thick with emotion. "The world will know Daniel Vance as the hero he was. A foundation will be established in his name to fund the next generation of engineers and thinkers, the kind of brilliant minds he would have championed." He paused, looking at the young woman before him, who possessed her father's intellect and a strength all her own. "Project Chimera is as much your legacy as it is his. Blackwood Industries needs a new vision. It needs a conscience. It needs a Vance. I want you to stay, not as an employee, but as a partner. Help me build the future your father envisioned. Ara looked out the window at the sprawling city below, a world she had only ever served from the margins. The offer was astounding, a life she could never have imagined. It was justice. It was a future. It was everything her father would have wanted for her. She thought of the years of struggle, of her mother's slow decline, of the quiet loneliness that had defined her life. Then she thought of her father's journal, his words of love and faith in her. My North Star. She turned back to Blackwood. A small, genuine smile touched her lips for the first time that day. I think, she said, her voice clear and steady, I would like that very much. Her journey had begun with a single dollar and an insult designed to make her feel worthless, but that dollar had become a key, unlocking her past and rewriting her future. It was a reminder that true value is not measured in wealth or status, but in intelligence, in courage, and in the unbreakable bond between a father and the daughter he knew would one day finish his work. The story of Ara and the dollar tip is a powerful reminder that the smallest actions can have the most profound consequences. A single dollar, meant as an insult, became a symbol of hope, a catalyst for justice, and the key that unlocked a 15-year mystery. It shows us that beneath the surface of our ordinary lives, extraordinary destinies may be waiting. Ara wasn't just a waitress. She was the heiress to a brilliant legacy, and she had the strength and intelligence to claim it. Her story proves that dignity is not something that can be taken away by the rich or powerful. It is something you possess. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. What did you find most inspiring about Ara's journey? Let us know in the comments below.